Well, actually, Varun, he found this quote. It's a beautiful quote of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and where that's a nice point. I forgot, and I told you we could discuss it today. There's this well-known quote of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, where he's expressing this extreme mood of humility, and he's saying, actually, we can read it.
Yeah, I'll try to find the quote to put on to the. I found it here. I'll paste it into the chat.
Yeah, you can paste it into the chat there. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, I'll let me put it in here. So yeah, this is Saraswati Thakur. I used to think of myself as a learned scholar in mathematics and philosophy, but by my good fortune, I met my spiritual master. When he shocked me by pointing out that my great qualities, my truthfulness, my pure moral life, and my vast learning were insignificant, I realized how great he must be to consider such qualities insignificant. By his push, I could understand that there was no person as fallen and wretched as myself. I understood my actual position. Here was a great soul who placed no values on qualities such as learning and moral character, qualities I esteemed highly. I understood what an invaluable object this great personality must possess. I concluded that he was either extremely merciful or extremely proud. Thereafter, I took shelter of the Supreme Lord with humility. By the Lord's mercy, I realized that without the service and mercy of such an, is it Akinkana? I could not achieve spiritual success. When I developed that good intelligence, I received the shelter and unlimited mercy of my spiritual master.
Yeah.
I think it got cut off at the bottom. The shock I received from my spiritual master made me realize that unless people are similarly shocked, they will not come to their senses. Therefore, I declare that I am the most foolish person in the entire world. Do not become foolish like me. Do not try to measure the spiritual master or Krishna. Discuss Krishna Katha, and you will certainly become a great personality.
Very nice. So the context of this expression is that Srila Saraswati Thakur, he was, even from his youth, he was renowned, respected within society, like the upper society of the day. This is in the Bengal area, especially. And I mean, part of that is because Saraswati Thakur's father was quite highly respected. He was a Bengali man who was working as a magistrate for the British government. He was respected and appreciated by British people. This is the time of the British rule. So that was Bhaktivinoda Thakur's position. So it was natural that his family were very respected. But then besides that, Saraswati Thakur, he was, for Colin, Saraswati Thakur, he's one of our important gurus, and he has particular significance. He was active like in the early 1900s, and he has particular importance for us because he's the person who established how we practice Krishna consciousness in the modern age. So the practices we follow, this, the type of like temple arrangements that we have, the way we worship, the mantras we chant, our daily schedules, this is and much more, which is, we can talk about another time. But he made a revival of Krishna consciousness, and as a part of that, he had to make some adjustments in how it is practiced nowadays. So he's very, very important for us. And he was a great revolutionary, a very great revolutionary. And he had to deal with much opposition in order to facilitate persons like ourselves, having the opportunity to practice Krishna consciousness. But anyway, so as a young man, he was already showing these brilliant qualities. He was very intelligent, very cultured. He'd already received different forms of recognition, like he had this title from an astronomical society. So he was so much respected that there were even some gurus in the society who were after him to make him their disciple, because they thought, oh, if we can have him as our disciple, it will give us some prestige, However, Saraswati Thakur's father, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, directed him to go to one Vaishnava in particular, Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, and he's on our Guru Parampara, in our line of gurus. You'll see on our altars in our temples. So his father directed him to go to this Gaur Kishore, he was of a, there are two types of pure devotees. They are described as Goshtyanandi, which refers to a Vaishnava who has the mood, like a mood of going out and preaching and helping people. And then there's another mood called Bhajananandi, which means a Vaishnava who likes to practice in a reclusive way, in a solitary way, connecting with the Lord, through their heart and rendering their divine service in that way. So these are two moods which pure devotees have. And this Gaur Kishore, he was a Bhajananandi. He had this mood of a recluse. And he didn't like to mix with the general society. He didn't like to accept disciples. He wouldn't accept this. He didn't like to accept any position of fame. So anyhow, Saraswati Thakur, on the order of his father, he came to request Gaur Kishore for initiation, but Gaur Kishore refused him. and not only once or twice, but it was actually around 18 times, something like that. And so as a result of that, Saraswati Thakur, he expressed this very humble feeling here, like he, in the general society, he was so much respected for his learning and his culture, his status, etc. But this Gaur Kishore, who's a genuine pure devotee, that was all like nothing to him. He didn't, in his humility, Saraswati Thakur is saying, I realized that I was arrogant, this is how he's representing himself. That's not how we'll think, but, I was arrogant. I thought all of these things were valuable, but to him, these things were nothing. So it made me consider, what does he have that can enable him to think all of these things are meaningless? He must be in possession of something so much more. There's another statement where Srila Saraswati Thakur says that, my spiritual master, he cannot even write his own name, because this is another thing. Gaur Kishore, he was illiterate. He didn't have any of this scholarship, learning, and high culture, and all of this. He was illiterate. And so this one comment of Saraswati Thakur's, he said that, my spiritual master, he could not even write his own name. However, all spiritual knowledge is contained in one of his toenails. But anyhow, so this brought us to another point that, how do we understand this? Where Saraswati Thakur is being put in this kind of position, and how he's rejected like that. For someone who we think of as being a very exalted soul, how can they be treated in this way? How can we understand this? And so this brought us on to another discussion, which is a little of a fine, difficult point. And that is that the Lord and his, we're all very familiar. We're very conversant with the fact that we are under the influence of illusion in this world, right? we all experience that in different ways. We experience that we don't have control. We don't always have control over how we perceive, how we react to different stimuli in different situations. We're dragged, against our will often, by our minds, by our senses, by the bodily urges. The more that we develop, the more conscious we become that we are utterly distinct from these other urges and the attraction that different aspects of our existence has for corresponding aspects of the environment around us. It's something that's not actually coming from within ourselves. It's something coming from some outer layer of ourselves, So we experience this bewilderment that takes place, and that's as a result of Maya or Mahamaya, who is, she's actually just doing her job. She's actually just, she's actually a great devotee of Krishna, and she's just doing her job. She, on the one hand, she acts as a kind of quality control for the souls of this world, to help us ultimately develop and grow and move past all of these, lower desires. And then on the other hand, she's, like helping to protect the higher sphere of reality, so all the riffraff don't come running in. It's funny, I'd never thought of it that way. Like, I always just thought of it in relation to myself, but I came across a comment like that in Brahma Samhita, and I was like, wow, like I never even thought of it like that. If we were allowed to enter there as we are, we'd just start, like Srila Maharaj says in one place, we'd start looting everything. Like Guru, I'm going on a tangent now, but we have some time. But Devi Prabhu, he told this nice story how in London for a long time they were trying to find a new temple. It was like going on for years. It was a major issue. And then at one time, Devi Prabhu's daughter, who was a young girl at the time, maybe 8, 9, something like that, and she very innocently asked her father, Devi Shish, everyone's trying to find the new temple, but you're all struggling so much. Why don't you just go to Vrindavan? And everyone says in Vrindavan they have these wish-fulfilling trees, Kalpa Tarus. Why don't you just ask go to Vrindavan? Look, let me break it down for you. Just go to Vrindavan, ask one of these wish-fulfilling trees, please give us a temple. That's it, like, story over. So she told this to her father. And Devi Shishru explained, well, it's true, Vrindavan has these wonderful trees, but Vrindavan is a purely spiritual place. And we have material vision. We have material eyes. So we're not able to see the pure Vrindavan now, and therefore we cannot connect with those trees right now. And so he gave that answer. And then the time went by, and it was time for Gurudev's next visit, because Gurudev was coming almost every year for a long time to London. So then Gurudev's in London again, and Devi Shishma thought, and let me check with him that I gave the right answer. And so he asked Srila Gurudev, he told her, Nadia, my daughter, she asked this, and this is how I answered. Is this correct? And Gurudev said, what you said, it is true, but it is not the right answer. And then Gurudev said, because actually in Vrindavan, everyone wants to serve one another. And actually, they don't like to take or ask for anything for themselves, but they're always in this mood of wanting to give to one another. This is the atmosphere in that world. There's this competition to give, to serve, to dedicate to the environment, which is just the opposite of this world that we are in. So if we went in, we would be like very awkward persons if we went in there now in our current state. Everything we see, we want to take it for ourselves. But anyway, so we all have the experience. We read in the scriptures, we hear from the saints, and we also experience for ourselves the power of this illusory energy, which is called Mahamaya in this world. However, and this is a finer point which isn't discussed as much, at least like in a more general sphere, which is that there is another type of Maya. There's a spiritual Maya. There's a positive Maya illusion, and that is and she is called Yoga Maya. So there's Mahamaya, the material illusion, and there's the Yoga Maya, the spiritual illusion. And that Yoga Maya influences both the Lord and his eternal associates, his eternal liberated associates. And the reason for this Yoga Maya is that, too much dry consciousness of things, it spoils things. It can spoil relationships, it can spoil situations. So this is what enables these wonderful loving exchanges to take place between the Lord and his devotees. That's what enables Krishna's mother to think like he's my boy, and I have to take care of him, I have to discipline him, I have to feed him, and so on and so forth. And that's what enables his friends to jump on his shoulders, to take a bite of an apple and then to give it to him. Oh, Krishna, this is very nice, please take this. So all of these wonderful loving exchanges, they're facilitated. They are facilitated through the influence of Yoga Maya, who creates this kind of forgetfulness. Because otherwise, if all of these persons were in constant awareness, this is God, this is the great almighty divine source, that would just spoil the fun. Then they would, it would ruin the intimacy and the closeness that they feel with him. So that's one factor about Yoga Maya. And then another thing is that if the Lord has some particular teaching, some particular purpose, then Yoga Maya can help. She's kind of like also like a stage. She's like a film producer, like she's the stage manager, she's the director, like the one in the background, right? You have like the main cast on the stage, but then you have the film crew behind. And so Yoga Maya is like that, like if the Lord has some particular teaching he wants to demonstrate, or some particular purpose he wants to fulfill, then she's the one in the background arranging things so that can all come through very nicely. And so therefore, so then this brings us back to where we started, in the case of a person like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, we consider him to be someone who, not like one of ourselves who's, in this world because we have to be, because we're cycling in this cycle of birth and death, as a result of our karma. We're here because we have to go through our karma. We're bound by the results of our karma. But in the case of very rare souls like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, they're not in this world out of necessity in that way, but they have descended from the higher world in order to fulfill the Lord's desire. And in this case, his desire to help the lost souls of this world. That famous Bhagavad Gita verse, Yada yada hi dharmasya glanir bhavati bharata bhutanama dharmasya tad tatmanam. Is the best way to go. But whenever there's an uprising of adharma and a decline of dharma, then I appear at that time to restore things to their proper order. And so sometimes the Lord is coming himself, and sometimes he's sending delegated agents. And so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he is one of those divine persons. And then you can say, well, how can you be sure about that? And that can be understood on the basis of simply recognizing their extraordinary quality, descriptions in the scripture, and also by what is said by other persons who have been accepted as very great souls. So anyhow, Saraswati Thakur is someone who we consider to be of that type of stature. And therefore we could understand that he is under the influence of Yoga Maya, the illusory energy. And so, there are certain things that when we look at the lives of these kinds of persons, we have to approach very carefully, because we cannot approach them in the same way that we'll look at the life history of any ordinary person. We have to be careful in how we do that. Then one example is coming to mind of how, because there's particular purpose, there's particular instruction behind, there's particular meaning and significance behind all of the events of their lives, and they don't necessarily reflect, who they are actually internally. So like by that, I mean, like they'll go through these, like they may show some process of realization. It doesn't mean that they were ignorant before, but that, that's something that's being shown as a teaching to this world. Like, how did they come to this point? And all of these things that they go through, they're of particular inspiration or instruction to persons like ourselves. There's another nice example that's coming to mind is how Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who the father of Saraswati Thakur, he showed this whole process of evolution in his coming to embrace the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and the Prema Dharma. And so, in the beginning, he actually appeared at a very interesting time in society. This is like during the time of the British rule. He was very present in the cultured society of the day at the same time as Rabindranath Tagore, the famous Indian poet who won a Nobel Prize. And actually, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was very good friends with a brother of Rabindranath Tagore, who was called Dwijendranath, I think. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was mixing with these kinds of persons. And of course, the British influence, the Christian influence was quite strong at that time. So there were different, like religious paths that were in vogue at that time. Like there's one, I think called the Brahmo school. And it's some kind of mix of like I mean, maybe someone can correct me here, I could have it wrong, but as I recall, some type of mix of Christianity and the impersonal paths, the Advaita school given in the Vedas, some type of mix like that. Bhaktivinoda Thakur showed this movement, like showing interest and involvement in some of these ideas. And he was actually recruited to be a writer for one magazine related to this conception at one time, something like that. The proponents of that school of thought, they were hopeful that they were going to get Bhaktivinoda Thakur, to that extent, there was this involvement that was beginning to take place. So, he was for a period, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was exploring different ideas. And finally he came to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And then, it's mentioned that he there was one, he came to the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam. He came to, which was not easy, because the educated society of the day, they dismissed Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they dismissed Srimad Bhagavatam. It wasn't easy to get a copy even. So it wasn't easy for him to come to, what I mean is, it wasn't like there was this support in the environment to, clearly showing this is the way. But as a result of his own searching, he came to this conclusion. This is the most superior path teachings that I've come across. And then there's one point in particular which he was puzzled on for a while, which is that he thought, I can appreciate Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but I cannot understand why he is pointing to Krishna as the supreme entity, because Krishna is a puzzling figure. Krishna is a womanizer. Krishna's conduct is not very exemplary. He's a simple cowherd boy. How are we supposed to understand he's the supreme entity? And then Mahaprabhu, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was this very strict sannyasi. It's mentioned, I think we might have mentioned this recently, he wouldn't hear the name of a woman. That was what was expected at that time. And that's how strict he was. He would sleep on he would sleep on some simple mat on the ground. He was very strict in his conduct, very renounced. So how is it possible that and he was a great scholar before, great Sanskrit scholar, Nimai Pandit. So how is it possible that this Sri Chaitanya Dev, he's saying, he's holding Krishna to be the supreme deity? This doesn't add up, And then, meditating upon this, reflecting on this, he came to the realization that actually Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is Krishna. And that by coming as this, in this way as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he's showing the dignity and the purity of Krishna Lila. Externally Krishna Lila appears to be, if we just looked at it in a material way, we would say that's just degraded, But we have to understand, it's actually, all of that is taking place on a spiritual platform. It is not comparable to our experience of this world. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he showed this development in his realization, and he came to this conclusion. But you see, it's very it's very instructive. There's a big statement in how Bhaktivinoda Thakur made this shift. like how he, he moved from these like schools which are emphasizing knowledge, consciousness, renunciation. He moved like very deliberately, and with all of the intelligence and brilliance that he had, he very deliberately shifted from that and came to embrace the Krishna conception, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Srimad Bhagavatam. So that, that's something that you have to think about, and in fact, so what I'm saying is that, like, somebody could say, like, oh, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur didn't know all of this before. And on one level, you can say he didn't, because he's under the influence of this yoga maya. But there's a purpose here, there in this development that was shown in the course of his life. There's a particular teaching there, and it, it's something that grabs people's attention. And then, and in fact, there was one incident that's coming to mind, where in his later days there were these so this became something quite, how can I say, like, it was something quite striking to people, when they heard this news that this Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who's a government magistrate, very much appreciated, respected by the British government, very educated, very cultured, very intelligent, all of these things. He's come to take up the path of bhakti. He's come to take up the path of Sri Chaitanya Dev. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his followers at that time in Bengal, they were seen like almost like bums, like, oh, the people who can't get a job, or the people who have no place in society, they join Mahaprabhu's group. Yeah, we know about them. And there was some reason behind that, because there were many persons who were misrepresenting Mahaprabhu's teachings. So anyway, like, this was the kind of reputation that Mahaprabhu's followers had. And also, like, already, like, there's a general prejudice amongst scholars that people who come to bhakti, they're like, kind of, bhakti is for the weaklings, like bhakti is for people who don't have enough brain power to properly study the scriptures, or they don't have the stamina to practice yoga properly. Like, yeah, they can follow this sentimental path of bhakti. There's already this kind of prejudice among scholars. And then, to make matters worse, then this is like, the group of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who are just like a bunch of jobless bums, who in some of them, engaging in even, very unsavory behavior, illicit behavior in the name of devotion. So there were all kinds of misrepresentations going on. So then the fact that someone like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, who's of such high standing in society, okay, someone who has such high standing in society, they're leaving all of that and coming to this line of Krishna Bhakti, in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It was something, people had to sit up and pay attention. And he's writing many books. He's giving many lectures, and in his very cultured and educated and intelligent manner. And people have to pay attention. What does he have to say? So because of this progression that took place, it was a very powerful statement in society. And it began this renaissance of Mahaprabhu's movement in India at that time. What was the other thing I was going to say? Can't remember. I lost my thread. Anyway, I've made the main points, I think. Yeah. another thing that oh yeah, I forgot, I remember now. I wanted to tell this one story. That so there was this one occasion. I mean, no doubt there were many incidents like this, but this one story in particular that is coming to mind. This was towards the end of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's days. And there was this group of educated young Bengali men who they heard about, and actually at the end of his life, so Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was like very actively like on the public field, and the publishing field and many fields in trying to reestablish the dignity and the purity of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. And then in the last period of his life, he actually withdrew, and he became what we would refer to as a Babaji, very, very renounced from the world, wearing very, very simple cloth, and just focusing on his private, his private practice, you could say. His inner bhajan, his inner service, with the Lord. So he was very active in public for a long time, and then at the end he withdrew. And so that was also quite interesting, for people to see how he became this reclusive Babaji, living this very simple life of devotion. And so at one time, like when he was in this final phase of his life, there was this group of educated young Bengali men, and one of them, in fact, what was his name? But he later became a disciple of Srila Saraswati Thakur. But anyway, they came to visit him, and why? Because they were so struck by what they'd heard. This government magistrate, like very highly positioned person in society, he became this Babaji and devotee of Sri Chaitanya Devi. So they went to some trouble, went out of their way, traveled some distance to come to visit him, to meet with him personally, and to hear what he had to say. So it was really something very, very striking in society. And as I said, as I've already said several times, like a broken record, making, this whole course of progression, it made this very clear statement. Okay, Colin, thanks for your message. We'll see you another time. So yeah. Does that clear things up a little more, Varun?
Yeah, it's that was really good context. I didn't know that was the perception of this back then.
Oh yeah, it was bad. I mean, because you can't blame people for thinking like that, because there were so many groups. There was one person who identified 13 different groups who were calling themselves followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but they were actually misrepresenting in different ways. Uppa sampradaya, like bogus sampradayas. So and there was a spectrum. There were some which were misrepresenting in more of an innocent way, but there were some who were just very degraded and gross. Persons who would imitate, they'd make this mix of like dark tantric behavior, with their ideas about Mahaprabhu and Krishna. And so, they'd engage in sexual acts and saying, oh, this is some very high thing, this is the far end of the spectrum. So there was all kinds of stuff going on. And because Mahaprabhu's mood was very broad and very generous, then there was this there was this, I guess it was like more open to being exploited, you could say. Mahaprabhu, because Mahaprabhu rejected the caste system, right? And he rejected, his mood was that we're all eternal servants of Krishna, and it's all about the prema dharma, the path of divine love, but as we all know, this whole like love idea, it can really be exploited. It's all about love, but there are many different expressions of that, it's just love, it's just love. So that there was this his movement was very open to that type of interpretation, so yeah, all kinds of things took place, and so like the good society, the good or educated pious society, they had a very low opinion of Mahaprabhu's teachings. So the work that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur did was so crucial, was so important. After Mahaprabhu left, then for some period, then after Mahaprabhu left, you had Rup and Sanatan. There were different phases when things were more upright. So like Rup and when the 6 Goswamis were active in the generation after Mahaprabhu, they maintained the dignity of the Sampradaya, and for a few hundred years after. But then there was this long span of, I don't know how long, maybe 200 years or so, when things just started to really go downhill. And so then Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he came and he started this renaissance, and to show people what this really is, what is the dignity of all this, what is the real understanding about all this. And then he passed that, he started that renaissance, he started that revival, and then he passed the rudder to his son Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who completed that. Well, not completely, because then he passed that on to his disciples, who eventually brought it to the Western world. But within India, at least, Srila Saraswati Thakur, very, wonderfully showed the grandeur and the purity and the dignity, the wonder of what Krishna consciousness is, who Mahaprabhu was, what his teachings were. He did that on a very grand scale. He was, like one nice way, I've heard someone express it, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he worked within the existing society. It was kind of like he laid the groundwork. He started to set the wheels in motion. And then Saraswati Thakur came and he just started this full-fledged revolution. And, he came out in this very clear and bold way with what, Krishna consciousness is. So, yeah, we are so indebted to them. We are so great, and they're so important for us because, within this modern age, they're the ones who have enabled, these teachings to become available and appreciated. So, yes. Let's see, a few other devotees have joined us. I see Ananda Swarup. Is that Ananda Swarupini in London? Hi, Dandavat. Very nice to see you.
My face just over here.
How are you?
I've missed you, Vishakha Didi. I think about you a lot. Everything you've ever said, it's like in my mind, like, what would Vishakha do? In general, something like that. Any purports. So, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing okay by the grace of Gurudev and the Vaishnavas. we're going on keeping somewhat alive to some degree in Krishna consciousness. I mean, that in itself feels miraculous sometimes. That wow, I'm still here, still trying in some capacity to some degree. That only by the grace of our gurus. That nothing's our property. Even the inspiration to keep going, even our appreciation for Krishna consciousness, it's not our property. So it's by their grace that we're still able to wake up every day and think, I'm gonna keep going, keep trying. Wow. Very nice to see you. Are you on the East London side now, or in the West London side?
Home. So East London.
East London, okay.
Yeah, that's my regular place. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And how are the programs at the temple? Is it more open now?
Yeah, yes, it's more open. Yeah, still a bit quiet in a sort of on a day-to-day basis, but yeah, it's open and people come again and stuff. So that's better in that way.
Are you having full Sunday programs again?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, the feast and the lecture and Rebirth comes.
Okay.
So that's going again.
Okay. And I see also Madhavi has joined. Is that Madhavi from Colombia? Is that you, Didi? Maybe. Okay, what? And I saw Narayani was also there, but she's gone. Okay, well, anything else, or should we stop there for today?
As always, Didi, thank you so much for joining us. Really.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for engaging me. Okay, we'll look forward to next time, and wishing you all, happy week ahead. Offering my dandavats, and yeah, so we'll meet again soon.
Well, Vishakha, maybe we can also just maybe a suggestion for next week. The difference between Banu and Vapi.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
If nothing else comes up between then, or somebody else has a different question, but.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that sounds like a good topic. Yeah. Okay.
Jai Vishakha Devi Dasi.
Vishakha Devi. Jai Hare Krishna.
Jai Shri Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. All the assembled Vaishnavas ki Jai. Gaur Premanand.